morning. I'm Mai Rodriguez, sitting in for Mikey Oreta. You're watching Basis Points, where we dive deep into the numbers and stories that drive our economy and shape our world. The headlines. Agriculture Secretary Francisco Tiu Laurel threatens to revoke the permit of rice importers if they will not remove labels on the country's staple. Critics question the constitutionality of the proposed 6.3 trillion peso national budget for next year. And several experts say Russia may have shot down the Azerbaijan Airlines plane that crashed into Kazakhstan. Let's take a quick look at the financial markets. Wall Street's main indices closed largely unchanged on Thursday amid light trading the day after the Christmas break. According to preliminary data, the S&P 500 lost 0.04%, while the Nasdaq Composite lost 0.05%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose to 0.06%. Among those mega-cap stocks, Tesla, Amazon.com, and the Meta platforms slipped. Markets in Europe, London, and parts of Asia were closed on Thursday. The Philippine Stock Exchange, or PSE, moves to unify the trading platform. It will acquire an additional 61.9% stake of the Philippine Dealing System Holding Corporation, or PDSHC, valued at 2.32 billion pesos. The PSE will purchase 3.87 million shares of PDSHC from various stakeholders at 600 pesos per share. PDSHC is a holding company that manages entities providing financial market services such as registry, clearing, settlement, and other financial market services. The International Monetary Fund, or IMF, urges the government to restore the capital of Land Bank and Development Bank of the Philippines. This after the state-owned lenders infused 75 billion pesos to the Maharlika Investment Corporation. Sujin Kim has the details.
The International Monetary Fund is calling for the immediate recapitalization of state-owned Land Bank of the Philippines and the Development Bank of the Philippines. This recommendation follows Land Bank and DBP's 75 billion peso contribution to the Maharlika Investment Corporation, the country's first sovereign wealth fund. The MIC was created to finance critical projects such as infrastructure development, renewable energy, and digitalization initiatives. However, the IMF noted that the contribution significantly impacted the bank's liquidity and common equity, a key indicator of financial health. Based on the data, the CET1 ratios of both banks declined, with DBP falling below the regulatory minimum of 10%.
Because of that reduction in capital, DBP will have no choice but to reduce its assets and loan portfolio. Simple implication, they cannot expand.
Land Bank and DBP previously requested regulatory relief from the central bank. This means temporarily waiving penalties for failing to meet regulatory capital requirements.
So regulatory relief means they will not be penalized, in particular DBP, for falling below the regulatory minimum, but they will be given time to earn the income to beef up their capital. The regulatory relief would mean that they will be exempt from the law that requires government owned and controlled corporations to remit 50% of their net income until they meet that regulatory minimum.
Escucha remains optimistic that DBP can regain the 10% CET1 ratio by year-end, provided it generates a net income of 10.4 billion pesos.
And I think by next year, DBP will be over the hump. It will take them at least 2025, or if they earn less than 10 billion in 2024, up to 2026 for them to meet the minimum capital ratio.
Despite this, Escucha warned that extending exemptions to Land Bank and DBP could create an unfair advantage over private banks.
Well, it's an obvious issue because dapat kasi to keep the playing field. Kasi if that requirement is good for the private sector banks, that should also be applied to the government-owned banks. It's as simple as that.
The IMF added that the central bank must ensure that any exemptions are temporary and will not compromise the integrity of the financial system. Sujin Kim, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
Agricultural Secretary Francisco Tiu Laurel threatens to revoke the permit of rice importers. This is if they fail to comply with a new policy that mandates them to remove premium and special labels from imported rice. Tiu Laurel says that some retailers and traders use the label to justify high rice prices. But locally produced rice is exempted from the rule to protect Filipino traders and farmers. The proposed 6.3 trillion peso national budget for next year faces a potential challenge before the Supreme Court over questions on its constitutionality. Agatha Gregorio has this special report.
The 2025 budget is under thorough review by the President and his cabinet to ensure it's constitutional. But soon there may be a petition against it at the Supreme Court alleging it's unconstitutional. Law professor Dante Gatmaitan, who also contested the constitutionality of the 2024 budget, talked about this possible petition.
Pwedeng i-lump together lahat ng mga claims ng unconstitutionality, like yung size ng budget, which is a lot bigger than the one offered by the President. Yung pagtanggal ng pera from PhilHealth. All of those things will be put into one case, or different parties bringing various issues. We're going to challenge the legality of many of these provisions, and we're going to ask, I think, hindi ko pa nakakonsult to, the petitioners are going to ask the Supreme Court to direct Congress to enact a budget for yung mga tinanggalan ng pera illegally, including the PhilHealth.
Together with Senate Minority Leader Coco Pimentel, Gatmaitan was among the signatories to the petition against the order to transfer nearly 90 billion pesos of PhilHealth funds to the National Treasury. Gatmaitan brought up a similar issue for 2025.
There's no such thing as excess, not in the current state of PhilHealth. May COA report na was this morning sa news that they are not sure PhilHealth can survive as a business with the state of their finances. So tatanggalin mo pa yung kanyang budget for operations, talagang magko-collapse yan. Yung unconstitutionality naman comes because a General Appropriations Act cannot amend a special law. Yung mga laws na sinasabi namin, yung PhilHealth Act mismo says na pag marami kang pera, there are only two things you can do with that money. You broaden yung coverage ng PhilHealth, di ba? Dahil napaka-limited niya ngayon. Or, ano yung isa? Bawasan yung premium na binabayaran natin. Okay? But, they're moving the money.
Multiple lawmakers have also spoken out against the removal of PhilHealth subsidy in 2025. These include Pimentel, Bongo, Amy Marcos, and Mig Zubiri. Zubiri hopes for the resolution of the issue in the education sector, especially the computerization program of the Education Department. According to the senator, the budget could be unconstitutional as DepEd no longer has the highest budget. But Gatmaitan said this was not an issue, as the Constitution only states education must be prioritized, but does not explicitly say education must have the largest allocation. Malacanang previously said some provisions in the budget would be vetoed. Gatmaitan is against this as that would only remove funding.
Ang options niya is, one, to repeal, veto the entire budget. So Congress has no choice but to write another one. At hopefully consistent yung provisions niya with the Constitution. Ang pwede niyang gawin is to convince both houses of Congress to reconvene the BICAM and then fix all the problems.
For now, it's a waiting game for lawmakers and the Filipino public on what the president will do with the budget. The Presidential Communications Office says the president is scheduled to sign the 2025 budget on December 30. Agatha Gregorio, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
The Philippine budget deficit more than doubled last month. This is after revenue collection dipped and spending accelerated. Bureau of Treasury, or BTR, reports that the budget gap widened by 128.38% to 213 billion pesos in November. This is equivalent of a 119.7 billion pesos growth from the 93.3 billion pesos same month last year. On January to November alone, the budget deficit increased by 5.92% to 1.18 trillion pesos from 1.11 trillion recorded same period last year. Russian air defenses downed an Azerbaijan Airlines plane that crashed in Kazakhstan, killing 38 people. A report from Reuters citing 4 sources with knowledge of the preliminary findings of a probe into the disaster. One of the Azerbaijani sources said that preliminary results showed the plane was struck by a Russian air defense system. The plane's communications were paralyzed by electronic warfare systems. A U.S. official also told Reuters there were early indications a Russian anti-aircraft system may have struck the plane. The Kremlin said it would be improper to comment until the investigation was finished.
It could have been a number of things. Obviously, there have been issues with maintaining flights, maintaining aircraft. I didn't know if it was perhaps a Russian plane that was having issues with maintenance because of sanctions. Once I saw the photos of the damage pattern on the tail of the airplane, it seemed likely that it was potentially caused by an air defense system, just because the shrapnel pattern was consistent with being shot down by a surface-to-air missile.
We're taking a quick break. Stay with us as we dive deep into the numbers and narratives that matter most to your bottom line. Welcome back to Basis Points. Let's look at how trading is going at the Philippine Stock Exchange. The main index currently at 65.53. From yesterday's close of 65.39, the sub-indices in the green are the all shares 0.25%, holding firms up by 0.83%, services 0.39%, mining and oil 0.30%. Those in the red are financials 0.12%, industrial 0.09%, and the property sub-index at 0.09%. Advancers currently outpace decliners 69 to 38. Value turnover is currently at 183 million. Meanwhile, at the foreign exchange market, the peso opened stronger at 57.85 against the dollar from its previous close of 57.97. Brazilian labor inspectors found degrading working conditions and forced labor at the Chinese electric vehicle maker BYD construction site in Bahia. Authorities found overcrowded sleeping areas and unsanitary food preparation. But the Jinjiang Group, a contractor for BYD, denied the allegation, saying there were translation misunderstandings. BYD has been building the factory with an annual capacity of producing 150,000 cars, initially in Brazil, with plans to start production in early 2025. As we approach the end of the year, all eyes are glued on what 2025 holds for the market. We're joined today by Cristina Ulang, Head of Research of First Metro Investment Corp, to help us understand how the market moved this year and what it means to your investments in the future. Hi, Cristina. How are you?
Hi, good morning, Mai.
Good
Happy New
morning.
Year na!
Yes, Happy New Year to you. Now, today is the last day of trading at the PSE, and we have this so-called Santa Claus rally where we see some buying action. At what level do you see the index ending the day today?
Oh, maybe 2% from the start of the year. We started at 6,450 and 2023, and we are likely to end this year maybe 6,580, 6,600, or 2% higher than last year. At least we're not down. We're not below the previous year.
Yeah, why do you say so, Christina?
Well, this is a seasonally strong period, usually, no? But we have all of this noise coming from the U.S. The Trump administration is going to be inaugurated and saying all of this strong dollar policy and all the tariffs. These are all downers for the market. It's dragging sentiment, but the season is usually very strong in history. Looking back, excluding all of this noise coming from the U.S., and hopefully there should be some remnant of that, some optimism going into 2025, because there are really a lot of growth drivers for the economy and a lot of catalysts for the market going into 2025. So a bit of that should filter through the market today and going into 2025 new year, early weeks of next year.
Yes, yes. So who do you think are the biggest winners and losers for the PSE and all stocks?
Yes, okay. Of course, the banks are the biggest winners. Number three, price gainer and winner for this year was Metro Bank, 48%. And of course, above that would be your ICT and of course, Converge, because of the fintech space, because of the interconnectivity that we're experiencing, AI, the need for more data center, and of course, global trade for ICT.
Right. So the new year is coming in a few days. What are your expectations for the Philippine Stock Exchange?
We are going to have an election year next year, and we know that election year usually brings additional growth. That's about 1% to 1.5% additional incremental GDP. So if we're going to be like looking back, if we achieve like a 5.8% to 6% growth this year, then next year we will have an increment of at least 1% or 1.5. So that's going to be a catalyst for the corporate earnings. And our corporate earnings, we're projecting like to remain double digit, a little bit above 10%, maybe 13% or 14%, but on an accelerating mode. I think that's the key thing. Acceleration of corporate earnings next year, knowing that inflation is going to be moving lower, staying within the target of 2 to 4%, at least within the target of 2 to 4%, which will enable the BSP to cut interest rates and then boost the liquidity within the system, because we're just growing. Our money supply M3 is just growing at 5.5 when we used to grow like 11.5%. So if the BSP cuts the triple R and then cuts the key rate to maybe 5% towards year end of 2025, then we will have more liquidity. That's going to be another catalyst for the market.
Right. So what's your estimate range for the index?
Looking back, we should always reference to the time when we had the rate cutting. In 2019, we had an upside of up to 8,000 level for the PSA. But the big but is that there is this tariffs being imposed, likely to be imposed, and that's inflationary. It's going to keep inflation higher in the U.S., the rest of the world also, and bond yields is going to be a bit elevated, lower, not much lower as earlier expected, because the rate cutting is going to be a bit slow, in no rush, and very careful. So I think that's going to be the tempering factor for the upside of the PSA. We may not hit 8,000, but we may achieve like a 10%, because we've gone down to like 6,500. So we may be returning back to above 7,000.
Yes.
If all of this rate cutting happens, our inflation stays within the target. And hopefully the big hope is that the US and China comes to an agreement that is going to be more amicable and not really going towards the worst scenario of a trade war. So I'm just hoping that they come to a very amicable settlement when it comes to the tariffs and all of these trade barriers that they are thinking about.
Yeah, so speaking of tariffs, what do you think are the triggers that could make the PSE index volatile?
I think we have to also monitor the currency. So aside from the inflation and aside from the rate cutting cycle, we have to look at the currency because the market is not used to a weak currency, and that's been proven in the past that every time we have this big rally, you look at the peso, it's really on the strong side, like 52 on the dollar, 51 pesos on the dollar. But we're far away from that. We are now at 58, 59, and that I think is worth monitoring because it's a leading indicator of where the market is going.
Yes.
So let's monitor that.
Well, at this point, when stock prices are low, what are your top 3 stock picks and why?
Of course, this is just my opinion. This is for information only, and this is not investment advice. But be overweight the banks because the banks are going to benefit from increase in loan growth, and then the loan spread is going to be is still very robust and wide because bond yields are not going to come down very fast. They're going to come down, but they're not going to come down very fast. So that's going to be beneficial for the banks. Second, overweight also the power sector because we are transitioning from fossil fuel to renewable, and many companies are now putting up a lot of capacity in the renewable space. We have Meralco, of course, and of course the Ayala Group, ASEN. But as far as the banking is concerned, be overweight among the top 3 banks: Metrobank, BDO, and BPI. And of course, gold is one asset class that's going to really be a good pick. We have two gold issues in the local market, and you know who those 2 are.
Okay, well, with regards to the markets, will it strengthen or weaken?
Sorry again, sorry. Will it?
The markets, do you see it strengthening or weakening?
Strengthening, of course. I think the market participants would like to see an upbeat result towards year end. It may not be big. We don't have the Santa Claus rally, but I think we're going to be ending the year higher than where we began, which was 6,450. So we will be ending the year 6,600 or maybe even better.
Yeah. Well, final question before I let you go, Christina. How do you see Trump's presidency affecting the Philippine markets or the economy?
Well, you know, the context is always a strategic competition between China and the US. And in that competition, there is always your bargaining chip, different tactics being employed to extract the biggest concession from each side. And I think the negotiating table is going to be very much active. Next year, Trump is going to be very assertive in his anti-China stance. He is going to be like imposing tariff, as he said, 60%, triple, and that's going to maybe come in waves until 2026. So I'm just praying that they come to a softer stance with regard to their negotiation. They may reach an agreement and it doesn't become very aggressive and to the detriment of the rest of the world. So that's my big prayer for 2025.
Thanks for your insights. Wishing you the season's best and a prosperous 2025, Christina.
Same to you, Mai. Bye-bye.
Christina Ulang of First Metro Investment. And that's it for Basis Points. I'm Mai Rodriguez. We'll be back next week for news on the financial markets and more. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.